Hey guys, welcome back. It's another episode of Vancouver Real. My name is Mike Zaremba, and I'm here with my older brother, Andy.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
And our partner in crime, Omid.
Hello.
And we're broadcasting here from Float House, or podcasting, I should say. We're podcasting from Float House at 70 West Cordova Street. This is our 9-tank facility here. We have a 5-tank facility in Kitsilano. And so if you're interested in floating and sensory deprivation tanks, check out floathouse.ca for a lot more information and videos and some frequently asked questions. And I'd like to give a quick shout out as well to Omid's YouTube channel, Omega Point. Omid has a creative, he lets all of his creative juices flow on that channel with his video production. So check out Omega Point on YouTube and Facebook if you're interested in I think just inspiring videos. So moving on, we're back with Mr. T.J. Dawe. Round two.
Hey,
the first repeat on Vancouver Real. He's,
we had to have you back.
Well, and for two major reasons too. One, because we ran out of time and we were just like, we barely scratched the surface with you. And then two, we had this is a minor issue, but we had some minor audio issues, and it just felt like, we didn't do it justice at all. So we're back, we've ramped up our production, and welcome back to Vancouver Real, TJ.
Good to be back.
Awesome.
Happy to be here. Happy to be the first repeat guest.
Yeah.
I'm flattered.
Cool. Well, and last time we talked a little bit about your so TJ is a writer, he is an actor, a director. You do a lot of these one-man plays, one-man shows, at Fringe festivals all over the world. What was your last Fringe festival that you've done? What was the last one you did?
Most recent one was in Orlando, Florida in May, and my next one is going to be Edmonton starting August 15th.
Oh, okay, great. So if anyone's in Edmonton out there viewing this or listening to this at that time, August 15th, how many performances are you doing?
I believe it's 9 over the course of just a little over a week, and then I fly immediately to Victoria, and I do my show Medicine about ayahuasca at the Victoria Fringe for a week there.
And Omid, that's how I was. Well, that's not how I was introduced to you. It's weird how I've known about you for a little while now, a few years, from our mutual friend Bergen, and then just Beams and Struts, which is this online magazine that you had started. Yeah. And then just some YouTube videos with Gabor Mate and stuff like that. So, But Omid took me out to medicine.
Yeah.
And
Medicine made a lot of waves. A lot of people saw that hadn't seen any of my previous stuff, because Gabor's got a lot of fans, and there's a lot of people that know of ayahuasca or who have tried it or who have never tried it, but they might want to and wanted to know more about it. So,
So in that play, what do? You act out like a whole ayahuasca ceremony, and you just kind of act out your journey, whatever that happens to be?
That's a part of it, yeah. So. Okay, so I went on a retreat that was facilitated by Gabor Mate, in which the participants ingested ayahuasca, but there was more to it than that. Yeah. So it was what can loosely be described of as group therapy. It was about 26 of us sitting in a big circle over the course of, I believe, 5 days. And Gabor would engage in one-on-one dialoguing with people. Now, anybody could join in. I usually didn't. And Gabor had no program, he had no script. He would just ask people questions, and the goal with his questions was to get to the root of somebody's pain. Some people knew exactly where their pain comes from. They might have been molested or mistreated otherwise as a child. Some people had no idea where their pain came from. Or sometimes they would have a sense that they would say, my childhood was perfect. And he'd say, okay, tell me about your family. And then it would come out that their father was an alcoholic.
And I think it was you that was saying Gabor he just has a natural instinct to kind of just look at somebody, ask you a few questions, and just go right to the heart of whatever it is that's bugging you or your problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then that would give somebody something to explore on the medicine.
Right.
And then after
that was before you drank?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then after, people would describe what they went through, what they saw, what they felt, and how they responded to it. And then that would lead to dialogue too, because quite often that was quite indicative of what somebody's coping strategies were in life.
Yeah.
And then that would also build on what the dialogue had been before. And then there was a second ceremony. And then again, what came out of the second ceremony. So in the show where I describe all this, I describe how I came to know of Gabor's work, how I found myself going to this retreat, what I experienced on the plant, how it connected to issues that go back my entire life, and then what I experienced on the plant the second time, and then the resolution that came out of that. So it isn't so much describing it, I do talk about it in the present tense. So I think that's a very important component of it too. So I'm not saying that, and then I felt this, or then I threw up, or anything like that. But it's more I'm going through it in real time, and really taking the audience through what it was like to go through this. So the very short version of the show is that the first ceremony out of the two was horrific. It was one of the most difficult experiences of my life. And I was sick to my stomach for hours and hours and hours. And I also felt extremely emotionally alienated. Actually, I never purged. I got sick to my stomach and I retched a lot, but nothing ever came out.
Okay.
And furthermore, I had just really awful feelings of alienation.
Like, so you like just loneliness? Like during the ceremony?
Yeah, definitely. And feeling like, what we've been told by the shamans who were part of the ceremony was that the plant has a consciousness and it goes into you and it sees what you need right now. And it gives you that experience, whether the experience you need is the one you want or not.
Yeah.
So to be on the receiving end of horrific, awful pain made me feel like what the plant had seen in me was that I was horrible and despicable and deserved the very worst. Which is what I've seen.
You actually thought that the plant was trying to show you that, or was that?
That was my belief at the time. Yeah, and that confirmed every bad thing I'd ever felt about myself, that I'd ever believed about myself.
Right. When I did ayahuasca, I did it just once, and the brew that I had wasn't very strong, and but I kept that kind of idea in mind that it's kind of giving you what you need. And I actually came out of it, and I got a lot out of it. Even though I had a mild experience, I got a lot of different things out of it. And when I came out of it, I felt really good. I felt great, actually.
And what was the context that you did it
in? We actually it was performed by, I guess he is a shaman.
Yes, it is a ceremonial context.
And it was ceremonial context.
Okay.
I think it was maybe 18 people or something like that in the group, and it was performed in like it's kind of like what is it called? A maloka? Yeah. I was gonna call it a hut, but and we all sat around a circle, and he did all the chanting and did your personal ikros and blew the tobacco on you. So it was the real deal.
Where was this?
It's in Maple Ridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mine was in Victoria.
Yeah. There you go.
Very exotic.
Yeah. But it was definitely worthwhile, and I'm going to be going back to him for sure. I don't have any plans to go back, but I will go back to him in the future to try to get the full blown experience. But but I felt like at that time, I remember when I was drinking, I was actually really nervous to drink, and I was just like, just trust it, and I just drank it. And I feel like I needed that mild dose at that time, to be honest with you. I felt like I wasn't ready to go in that deep right away.
Supposedly, a shaman can read you and give you the dose that you need.
Yeah.
So in our ceremony, everybody's dose apparently was at least somewhat different.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of the talk is on like the energetic qualities that the shamans develop these sensitivities to, and their ability to not so much even just read you, but like feel it almost. Can feel what you're emanating and be able to gauge it from that. But then there's also the side of it where even if you drink, like I did a trip in Peru in June. I just got back, and I did a 5 ayahuasca ceremony retreat there. And different people have different reactions, even to the same amount. It's not very much the amount that you're having. It's more the qualities of the individual that they're bringing to it, and like their state where they're at in their lives with their energy. And it really became apparent during this trip for me how much the energetic qualities play into it, and how much you can kind of almost get into a resonance with the plant medicine and kind of merge with it that way. Because there are some little, like not girls, sorry, like women, but they're smaller, like 5'2", 100 pounds, drinking nearly the same as much as myself, who's 6'2", 200 pounds. And yet they would feel nothing, and I would be on the full experience for 3 to 4 hours.
And what other substance can that be said about?
I don't know of any.
Yeah,
I really
certainly
don't.
Not vodka.
No. Yeah. Even on I shouldn't say that. I'll say all psychedelics because I haven't tried them all and everything like that. But but you're right. Like comparing that to vodka or a stimulant of some sort or other pharmaceuticals, there's not. It's going to affect you based on body weight. But then you have these spirit plant medicines, as they're often called, and it's a two-way. It's a co-participation. It's the person and the medicine. And they merge in one way or another. And a lot of things too, they'll give you what you need at that time or what you can handle. But it's really just yourself, and the subconscious parts probably is what I assume that's able to resist it or manage it for each experience. But
so that was your inspiration for your one-man show, the play
for medicine.
And that was with Gabor. So you did the whole experience, and then you went on to write the play. And did you actually, in the play, did you talk about your experience that you had, your own experience?
Oh yeah. That's the centerpiece of the show.
Yeah.
So it's the experience that I had, and then the context of my life that made that significant. Because any experience you have like that will have resonance of what your coping mechanisms are that go back to early childhood. And that's Gabor's whole idea, is that our personality is basically a survival strategy developed in early childhood to get our needs met. So then that begs the question, so what happened in your early childhood? What was your family like? Where did your stress come from? How did you get your needs met? And are you continuing that as an adult in any way that you might not even be aware of?
Which is really interesting, because that kind of leads you into the Enneagram subject, which you brought up last time, which I was really fascinated with, and I know Mike was too. And in fact, I actually went out and I did a personality test online, or Enneagram test online. And I told you before that I was like, oh man, I don't like that type at all. But I turned out to be a 3. Okay. They said you're most likely a 3. And a 3.
Could you give us a recap of what the Enneagram is for anybody who didn't see the last podcast?
I could try. The Enneagram it's a kind of a system of categorizing personality types. And there are 9 types, and I don't know what they all are, but I know that I'm a 3. And that was the achiever. According to the one that I read anyways. Yeah. And the thing I didn't like about the achiever was that it seeks outside validation a lot. So that person gets a lot of their self-worth through other people's praise or whatever. So I was I told you before too, I kind of think of myself in the same way. I'm like, in a different way, in the opposite way, where I feel like I don't need anybody. I don't care what anybody says about me. It doesn't matter,
Self-validating.
But yeah, I have a self-validating. But then when I started actually looking at myself and some of my behaviors based on what they described, I was like, oh man, maybe I am a 3. Maybe I am seeking people's approval in some way. Right.
You know that you're a type when you start cringing.
There you go. I was cringing.
I did it
at 1 in the morning. I was just like, oh, no.
Yeah, if you don't relate to the bad things about that type, because I think that's the value of the Enneagram, is to let you know what you're like at your worst, as well as your best, and what you can do to get to your best. But if you don't identify with the shadows of that type, then you're not that type. Then you might have idealized some aspect of that type, because a healthy 3 is a shining star.
Yeah.
They're charismatic. They're successful. They're quite often wealthy. They rise right to the top of whatever their particular field is, which may be business, which may be entertainment, or it could be just like being the dirtiest hippie in the commune. Or one of my Enneagram teachers works at a recovery home.
They want to stand out in whatever field they go into.
They learn what the values are, and then they become that thing.
Right.
So one of my teachers works at a recovery home and says he would have a guy there who within days knew all the lingo, and it seemed like he'd been there for years, and he's like giving newcomers advice, whereas he's just been there for days. He's very able to adapt and to become, okay, what is accepted here? In fact, what is praised? I'll be that. And I'll be such a good version of that I myself will believe it.
Interesting. And they also said in that, depending on, I guess, wherever you are in your life, that you could be mistaken for potentially an 8 or even a 5, it said.
Yeah.
Based on different things. So sometimes they're mistaken for an 8 or a 5.
In terms of your personal scenario?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, 3s can sometimes be like I guess misdiagnosed as like an 8 or a 5 sometimes. Cool. That's what it said.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But in going back to your play of medicine and how you do it, it's cool how you layer. I believe it's called a fugue. Is that right?
Yeah.
Where you kind of skip between stories, but then they all kind of tie into each other.
That's kind of my signature.
Is it?
Yeah, basically all of my shows follows that pattern. So I talk about this for a little while, and then with no segue whatsoever, I talk about something completely unrelated, but it's something else unrelated, and then back to this one, back to that, and then it all ties together at the end.
You see that in different novels sometimes. Different authors will skip from like one chapter, and then another story. It's like a whole other story will start at the next chapter.
Totally.
And then like each chapter kind of jumps between these different stories, but then the stories will merge. You know? Yeah. But then. And this is how I knew this, because Bergen said you wrote an article one time or some sort of paper called The Fugue.
Yeah.
And he told me that, and I was just like, I can't process this. What does it mean? So I want to ask you, what did you do for that when you wrote a fugue? What is that?
That came out of trying to explain to someone what a fugue is.
Okay.
Which is a musical term. So Bach composed fugues, Beethoven composed fugues. And I read a description of what a fugue is, and I was describing it verbally to this friend of mine, and she's a pianist. She knows and loves Bach. And even as I was describing it to her, I remember just thinking, this makes no sense whatsoever. This is very obscure, isn't it? And she said, yeah. So then I started looking on YouTube, and I found this guy's channel, Stephen Malinowski. And I think his YouTube name is Smalin or something like that. And what he does exclusively is animate classical music with little colored bars on a black background, which, funnily enough, is something people often see on ayahuasca. People often see a black background and kind of like neon colors.
Yes, I've seen that. You see, like, for me, I saw a lot of lines, linear, fluorescent lines on black.
Me too.
Yeah.
And apparently a lot of Shipibo Indian artwork incorporates that as well. I've heard it likened to animation from the movie Tron.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It looks like Tron.
Yeah. So this guy's animation of classical music looks somewhat like that too. Completely coincidentally. Anyway, his animation of Bach's fugue in G minor is just suddenly was this visual version of this thing I've been trying to explain in language. And the way a fugue works, and if you look up this video, it'll explain it better than I'm about to attempt to do so. There's an initial theme, there's a melody, and then once that melody reaches so it could be played by a piano, and in this case, in this video, it's just a piano, but it could be anything. It could be a guitar or a saxophone or a whole symphony, but it's just a single melody. And then once you reach the end of the theme or the riff, whatever you want to call it, the hook, it then goes into a variation. And as that theme is going on a variation, then there's a second voice that comes in and plays the theme at the same time as the other one's doing the variation.
Nice.
So it's not like rhythm and melody. It's two independent things, but they're related. And then once this one reaches the end of the melody, it goes into a theme. This one goes into a second theme. Then a third voice comes in and does the theme. Now you got three things happening at once. And you can add as many voices as you want, but it's probably not going to be too many.
Right.
So with an animation of this, you can see the different melodies. You can see the different voices. They're different colors. One's red, one's purple, one's green, one's orange. And you can see how they interact and how some disappear and then come back. And it just seemed like that's such a succinct way of describing that. That's brilliant. Yeah. So as I was walking around thinking about that, I started thinking of different novels that were written like that, or different movies that are structured like that.
I was going to say a lot of story
different
type
TV shows. Yes. Yeah, different. The video game Rock Band. Yeah. What that does is that breaks down any rock song into what each instrument is doing. And when you learn what each instrument is doing because of a color code, yet again, kind of on a black background.
Yeah, it's true.
You then hear that song differently from that point on. Even if it's the dumbest rock song there ever was, it really makes you appreciate what every instrument is doing.
You start picking out the hi-hat or something like, there's the hi-hat.
You notice the nuances, you notice the details, and it sharpens your ear, and it sharpens your perception. And so then I ended up writing a piece about this. And the way I extrapolate that into the significance of all this, not just that different artists have done this over time, but that now in the internet age, we all live like this. We're all active on multiple communication platforms every day, and we don't even find it unusual.
True.
That we can have a Facebook conversation with this person, and we're texting with that person, we're emailing with that person.
Right.
I
find it hard to keep up sometimes.
It can be hard to keep up.
Yeah. I have my Facebook Messenger, I have my text messages, my emails, phone calls.
Yeah.
Well, it's like a structural representation of compartmentalization. You heard of that term for people like that have to deal with a lot, like a president of the United States. You hear that. They're able to attack one problem, then switch gears and attack another problem, and try not to let them infiltrate their decision making based off of what one problem is in the other, and to really strip away emotion probably, and just be really objective and look at it like that. But
we watch TV like this too.
Right.
You know, when I was growing up, TV was episodic.
Sure.
One episode of Knight Rider did not end with a cliffhanger unless it was to be continued,
right.
which was pretty rare.
Pretty rare. Maybe end of the
Every
season.
episode was self-contained. Whereas nowadays, at least the shows that I watch and that most of my friends watch are serialized.
Right.
So basically every episode begins with previously on and continues the story. And you've got to watch the entire series for it to make sense. And you might be watching an episode of this one and then that one and then that one. And then you're trying to catch up on this old one. And then you're out of town. So it takes a while to catch up on this other one. And then Netflix releases a whole season at once. And then you try and catch up on those. And you're keeping track of all these different stories that are ensemble shows. And in a show like Orange is the New Black, you go into the backstory of given characters. So it's got a lot of characters. You find out more and more about each one. Lost was the same way.
Right.
So there's a lot to keep track of. Game of Thrones has a massive number of characters. And again, these are popular shows.
Yes. They're more complex almost now, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if that's like, and I was actually thinking about this earlier today because I was like, oh, what are we going to talk about? I was like, how much, like we're getting really used to a lot of information coming in from multiple sources, whether it's virtual or real life, you know?
Yeah.
And it seems like I was like, where is this all going? Why is this happening? And like, you know, what's going to be the product of this? Is it enhancing or debilitating? I don't know.
I think it's potentially both. That's the thing,
Sure.
is a lot of people get really worried about where the omnipresence of digital devices is taking us. Is it turning us into a bunch of just distracted narcissists who are combative and shit-talking each other on comment section on YouTube, and we only interact with people who share our own points of view? And that is the case, yes, for a lot of us, or at least part of the time. And on the other hand, we're becoming more dexterous mentally. And we're learning more points of view, and we have more access to information. We can just look things up more easily than we did before. We can pay attention to more things. We can find out about just human tragedies that are happening. We can donate to causes more easily than, just a click of a button, as opposed to putting a check in an envelope, which is just so much more involved. We can sign a petition more easily. We can rally our efforts together more easily. So I think both of these things are happening in the internet age.
It'd be really interesting to see what companies like those massive information collecting companies like Google, what if they, because I'm sure they are able to compile all this, like they can see our behaviors, the internet is recording all of our habits, our behaviors, our thinking, the things we're searching for, things we're interested in. I'd love to see like a big meta analysis. Like they probably have one of the clearest pictures of the human species, period.
Totally.
I'd be fascinated
at
to
this
see
time.
that. At this time. Yeah.
I heard that some governments will use Facebook as a way to monitor their whole nation's state of happiness, essentially, based on what they're posting and what comments they write in their news in their status updates. So they can gauge like the level of like happiness or dissatisfaction of a whole country based on what is being posted on Facebook.
I imagine during political campaign times, especially as well. It's like. A great way to kind of just what's the vibe out for this last piece we just put out there, this last statement or opinion that we've delivered now, and they're able to assess it right away and they start adjusting. So it's just, I don't know, they're changing so quickly that on our end, where we don't have access to these meta banks of information, we can speculate a lot, but I'm sure those big companies have a lot of cool information to share.
Well, and then the dark side of that too is there's a writer whose name escapes me right now, but he wrote a book called The Net Delusion, talking about how the KGB used to torture people to find out who they knew and who they associated with. Now you just find that out on Facebook. Who's friends with who?
Yeah.
Who showed up at what event?
Well, we actually had a friend. Well, I guess he's a friend who got stopped at the U.S. border, and I guess he's Islamic, right? So they stopped him, and they actually went into his Facebook, went into his phone, and made him show him all his pictures on his phone. They went through his Facebook conversations. They went through his emails, asking who's this, who's that, what are you doing with this person? Like just going into that. They forced him to do it like in a private, secure room.
Happens in Iran too. That's why if you have Iranian friends here, they don't have their full name some of them don't have it from and the fear of going back to Iran and getting stopped at the airport, being forced to. It happened a lot, like three years ago when huge uprising was happening. Like everybody that I knew would change their name before going to Iran, because they would look up how much you posted stuff against the government. And you wouldn't want to get caught.
Of course.
So, yeah.
Well, and that kind of speaks into the whole anonymity conversation. I find there's like, different generations. Like there's some generations below us and some above us. Like, and even myself, like I use my real name. You know what I mean? And I've noticed most people my age group do as well. But some groups, like a little bit younger, like 10 years younger or so, they're starting to use like an alias of some sort, which I think is probably not a bad idea. Just in case, especially when you're that young, who knows what kind of things you'll say or interact with or promote or post. So it's but I think that being said too, there is a power behind using your real. This is actually who I am. That's a real representation of me. And yes, I'll own the negative qualities that I've maybe put out there or whatever like that.
Right.
But, I think in terms of trying to create a transparency through the internet and using it as a tool for growth, it might be important to be truthful on there and real and all that stuff.
I agree.
Do you have your full name on yours?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to be cruel to someone if you're not in the same room with them.
Sure.
And it's even easier if you're not accountable by having your name there or your picture.
Yeah.
And that's a real shout out to the internet and internet culture altogether.
Yeah. And I mean, it's probably true because it is easy to kind of get stuck in your bubble and associate with the regular people that you do. And probably most of it is fairly positive for the most part, but it'd be interesting to see if that is just, how big is that bubble versus the negative bubbles? Or
even still, if they do make an alias online, they can go back and find out who you are for sure.
Yes.
They know what cell phone you bought. It had to be paid for by a credit card or something. You had to have some information associated with that. So they know your what do you call it?
IP
addresses and things like that. So I mean, if they want to find out who you are, they can find out who you are.
True. But that's just speaking to things that maybe aren't a threat or a security risk or something like that. But just in terms of like morality on the internet
and speaking of that, I think it actually will keep or make people more honest. There was this one video I watched a long time ago where they actually had school kids on a bus and they were all misbehaving and acting crazy and throwing stuff. And the second they put a camera on that school bus, the kids were just sitting there like this, for the entire bus ride.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you know you're being watched, it changes everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well.
So to weave back in a thread, just to turn this conversation into a fugue.
Yes. Podcast fuging.
About being a 3.
Yes.
What did you get out of that in terms of like what you might like to do with that?
Definitely not look for validation through other people, because it's probably a bad place to do that. Because a lot of times I find that you're not going to get the validation that you want through most people. Maybe like your closest friends and family.
Well, the danger with that too is even if you get it, what the validation is for something that you did.
Yes.
Not for you.
Yes.
And that's a pattern in a lot of 3s' lives, is that they grew up as the star. They might have been really good in school. They might have been really good in sports. It might have been both. And they were praised because they won the trophy, because they got straight
Well, that'd be
A's.
very true. I think a lot of the praise I got growing up was definitely from playing football. That was for sure in my family and with my dad. He was just like that. That was everything. And when I did really well, then that's what kind of. That's where I got the most praise and felt
the nature of sports
the best
is
of
like
myself.
that. Like we would be in university and you watch game film, so after every game they watch it multiple angles and they break it down slow motion, play by play. They watch every physical footstep you make and critique your technique and you were too slow there, you missed this, or
how can I improve?
Totally. Yeah. So it's
or
critiquing,
they'll rip you to shreds too. That's the other thing too.
Right.
Like they're pretty harsh. They can definitely.
Be. Yeah.
I think a lot of them are. For sure.
So the real journey for a 3 is to get the message from their loved ones and from themselves that I have value, whether I score a point or not.
Yeah.
I have value whether I make a lot of money or not.
Yeah.
I have value simply because I'm a human being.
Yeah.
Which is really hard to absorb because you've spent your life becoming like this machine that achieves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if I don't, so the inner message, each type has an inner message of like, I have value if I am blank or if I do blank. So for a 3, I have value if I achieve. I have value if I'm proficient. I have value if I'm the best, rather than simply the real message, which is I have value.
I have value just because you're a human being.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
that's definitely something, even it came so far as like me like getting not upset, but just being like a little bit bothered by not getting enough likes on a Facebook post or something. I'd be like, what? Why is nobody liking my shit? Why does nobody like it? And the Enneagram actually pointed that out. I'm like, yeah, that's you seeking validation from somebody else based on something that you did.
And ultimately, that validation, when it comes, will only last so long.
Exactly.
That is short term because that continues the cycle.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, I feel good because somebody liked it, because somebody else said you did a good thing, you've impressed me.
So that would be the darker side of that Enneagram, I'm guessing. What would be the positive side of that one?
The positive side is a 3, a very healthy 3, shines with a light that can charm God himself.
Okay. So how do I get there? That's the question. I want that. Yeah.
How do you get there? That's a good question.
Well, a very difficult thing to do, is simply to try and get in tune with your feelings. Not the
feelings?
It doesn't sound that hard, right? But yeah, exactly. 3s are quite often used to crafting their feelings to what the situation needs.
Yeah.
Rather than what do I really feel?
Yeah.
And what do I really want?
Yeah.
And when do I feel things that don't fit in with the pattern of me achieving the goals that I need to achieve in order to feel like I have value? What can I do that is not connected to achievement or praise? So I actually know a couple of different 3s who have learned to engage in visual art, which is not what they do for a living. It is purely for themselves. One of them, possibly an interesting parallel, grew up as a basketball star. And he got a lot of validation for that. And then in university, he played basketball. And then he went into the entertainment industry as an agent. And this is him telling me this. He always thought of himself as somebody who works with creative people, not somebody who is creative. And then as he hit about 30, it just kind of occurred to him like, is that a law of nature? Is that true at all? That I'm not creative, that I can't be creative? And he started sketching just for himself.
Cool.
Not to show it to anyone, not to eventually have his own gallery show.
So that's my next question. Basically,
just because it feels good.
And and just keep it to yourself. And that's just something that you do that you don't need to share with anybody else.
Yeah. And as a 3, watch out for the part of you that's going to come in and say, hey, this is good. I might be able to sell this.
Yeah.
Is have something that is purely for you, that is not for achievement at all, but is simply there as a way to explore your feelings and a way to let things out.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I
got to find that thing.
Yeah, I think whatever that is, like with that practice of learning how to just, especially for guys and for men, being even just personally abled to express themselves, to open up, to get in touch with the emotional side. Like that is so socially and culturally, I think things are changing for sure, and people are becoming more aware of this, but especially
by degrees.
By degrees.
But we got a long way to go.
I agree, 100%. Like it's not even close. And that's something that I kind of took from my Peruvian trip was that one of the guides or shamans was saying, a lot of our consciousness is very much in our head and centered around our brain, and a lot of our emotional body is within the body. What is the hips and the gut and the heart. Your gut instinct and your heart's centered and all those things. And he said a simple practice was just start visualizing, just transferring your consciousness from your head down into your heart. And because he always said that your heart is the spiritual seed, or is your seed for spirituality, And so that's something I've been just consciously practicing since then and throughout, just trying to bring just more awareness and attention to this part of my body. And that sounds like a really, really physical thing to do, but I personally believe that, the emotional body is kind of all in here. This is where you feel the queasiness is in the stomach, or your heart gets anxious, or your chest gets tensed.
Or where you have a gut feeling about someone or something.
Correct. Yeah. So, and just trying to just get reconnected. Because I think when you're children, you're very much in tune with that side of yourself. But as we age, just through whatever, we get disconnected. And
the influence of our family, the influence of our culture, of any number of things.
Yeah,
And
I think it's a really important thing for a lot of for men to work on a lot. I think everybody for sure, but guys especially.
I think guys just have a longer journey to go.
Yeah,
generally.
Yeah.
So even teary eyes or crying is a kind of like you can't do that in front of like regular friends because
generally not. Yeah.
And I heard on a podcast today that like tearing is such a massive way of purging, of releasing just emotional energy. Like let it go. But when was the last time you actually cried?
Well, this brings us back to medicine.
Just by the way, it's worth noting that I saw medicine 3 times, and 2 of the times it brought tears in my eyes. Okay. That which part? Yeah. And once with Mike, once with another friend, but once with another bunch of friends, Erica and another friend, and they all. Oh, did it make you cry? I don't remember, but.
I don't remember, but I definitely moved. Like, I mean, you have moments in that play where it's
it really
intense.
depends on it really because it really connected with me. I mean, and then another friend I had with me, I could hear her going like that. Yeah. So that's the part that you explained, the very intense part of your trip. So.
Yeah, and it brings me to tears every time I do it, and that's real. That's not an acting technique.
Yeah, I see that you reach for your
and the cathartic effect of going through that, not just on a regular basis in terms of doing the show 14 times over 2 weeks or anything like that, but doing it in public.
Yeah.
And having that amplified by people who are empathetic and people who get it has a tremendous effect. And I don't know that I've ever felt as good in my life as when I'm doing a run of that show.
I can
because
imagine.
All of these things that are trapped inside me just come out. And I actually feel like a human being rather than an interloper. And then I feel like people have genuinely seen me and not been repelled by what they've seen, which is huge.
I think everyone, when you're at that part of the show, it's so real and so raw that unless you're just not paying attention at all, which you don't allow because of just how captivating the story is, those mirror neurons start firing, and they feel it, and the whole energy of the room. And I'm sure for you, it's just like probably fairly transcending almost.
Yeah,
like you're experiencing it, but you're experiencing from probably multiple sects almost, like different places are.
Which fits right into the fact that one of my issues in the first place was a profound sense of social alienation. Just this belief that I've had since early childhood that if there's a group of people, I'm not a part of it.
Yeah.
That if I'm in a car with the 4 of us, that the 3 of you know each other better than I do, and I can't participate in that camaraderie, and that's fine because I don't really want to anyway. So then to go from that belief to the feeling of connection that I had with everybody who was on the retreat, and then the feeling of connection I have with everybody who sees the show is exactly what I need.
So that's kind of like blasting through your Enneagram. Or the negative parts of your Enneagram.
Totally.
And you said you were a 4, right?
Yeah, the unhealthy beliefs of my type. And 4 is the individualist. So I believe that I'm separate and I have value if I'm unique.
Right.
So the negative way to extrapolate that is I'm unique if I have nothing in common with everybody else. In actual fact, we're all unique.
Yes.
And you couldn't not be unique even if you tried. And to attempt to establish that you're unique betrays a deep-seated fear that you're not. In actual fact, uniqueness is something you just relax into. It simply is. You don't have to try.
Yeah.
So all of my attempts to establish that I'm different from those really just is a manifestation of an insecurity.
Yes.
And a need to soothe that wounded part of me.
Yeah.
So part of that wound was this belief that there were things about myself that I could never say, and then to say them in terms of that show and to not be rejected, but to be accepted by people is exactly what I needed, even though I never would have thought that before I did it. In fact, if somebody had told me that, I wouldn't have believed them.
So you're actually doing your Enneagram teacher's training now as well, or have you done it?
Yeah. No, there's 4 components to it, and I've done the first 2, and my girlfriend and I go to New York in October to complete it.
Right. And you're going to be teaching a course here?
It's a one-day workshop.
One-day workshop.
And it's actually quite similar to what I was just talking with you about. It's about developing a creative practice a personal creative practice whose goal is not to make you money and not to advance your career, but just to have in your life because it is good and therapeutic to be creative. It's good to sing, it's good to dance, it's good to write, it's good to do any creative thing just as a regular part of your life in the same way that it's good to exercise.
Right.
And it's good to eat healthful food.
So is that creative prescription kind of good for any Enneagram type?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My girlfriend and I did a presentation at a conference on the Enneagram a couple of years ago, and the name of it was How to Get Along with Me. There's a third friend involved in this too. And we did research on every single type and just looked for recommendations. When this type is stressed, what are they like? When this type is stressed, what do they need? How can you be a good friend to them? How can you support them? And the two consistent things that we found for every single type, one was nature. Get in nature. There was there was no type that had said, keep them away from nature.
Yeah.
Nature is harmful and destructive. You don't want that. No, being in nature is good for all of us. And the other was having some kind of a creative practice. And a practice, not necessarily your career, not something you can make money on, but just something that you have in your life because it feels good. So all of us have the capacity to do this. We tend to, a lot of us anyway, tend to leave it to the experts because I'm not as good a guitar player as such and such, so I'll listen to his music and I won't play guitar myself. Or I'm not as good a writer as such and such, or a singer or a painter or whatever. So I'll buy somebody else's painting, I'll have it on my wall, and that's that, and I'll do my thing. As opposed to, no, actually, I can paint too. And it doesn't matter if I'm not as good as them. It's something I do regularly because it feels good. Each of us will have reasons not to do that. Either I don't have time, or I'm not good enough, or my friends would reject me if I suddenly started doing this weird thing that didn't include them, or any number of things. Most of those reasons are illusions. They're attempts by our ego to protect us. And using the Enneagram is actually a way to navigate what some of those reasons are. So once you come to know what those reasons are, that really helps you come up with a plan. Okay, what am I up against? And then similarly, what do I have going for me that I might not even appreciate? I might have a total facility with collaborating, or I might be really good at working with my hands, or I might be really good at just sequestering myself and focusing on something. And it's something I've never really given that much credence to because that's just what I do. And that doesn't count, so who cares? So the goal of the workshop is to introduce not necessarily the 9 types, but to introduce a subtopic of the Enneagram, which is the 3 instincts, which is what my new show Marathon is about, the one I'm going to be doing in Edmonton, which I find actually a lot easier for people to find their place in than the 9 types. And for people to understand the relation to these instincts. So what's on your side, what's up against you, and then to come up with a plan, what you would like to do, what's a realistic number of times per week or per month that you can do it, and then the most important final piece of the puzzle, who can you check in with regularly about whether you're doing it or not?
Right.
Because if you're not doing it, it's not like you've committed a sin. It's just, that's an invitation to exploration.
Yes.
Are the forces inside me getting the better of me?
Right.
Am I starting to believe the reasons that I tell myself why I can't draw or dance or sing?
Right.
Or is there actually something external that's stopping me? Am I literally too busy to do this? Or do I just let myself believe I'm too busy so that I don't go there and be vulnerable?
So can you go over like the 9 types again? What are all the 9 types?
I'll do it more briefly than last time.
Yeah.
But type 1 is the reformer.
Yeah.
So very strict. They follow the rules and they want to do what's right, and they want everyone to do what's right. The ruling passion is anger, which is a righteous anger. Why isn't the world perfect? Type 2 is the helper. It's very caring, interpersonal, very attuned to the needs of others. I don't have needs, but you do, and I know what you need, and I'll give it to you before you even know you need it. And their ruling passion is pride, which is that I'm a good person and that he needs me.
Yeah.
And I did this great thing for him, and that allowed him to do this other thing. So I'm valuable, and I'm loved because of that. Type 3 is the achiever, which we've talked about. So that's the performer and the very efficient, proficient type who senses what the values are and then is that thing. And the ruling passion of that type is deceit. So it's not, I'm going to lie to you because I'm evil. It's more like, I will become the thing that's valued, and I'll do it so well that I believe it myself. Type 4 is the individualist who believes that they're different than everybody else and they could never be part of the system and they're unique.
Yeah.
The ruling passion is envy, which is that everybody has something I don't, which is the ability to just belong and to be a part of things. And I don't have access to that. And you know what? I don't even want it because they suck. And I'm better than them, even though I'm inferior at the same time. It's this interesting dance a person plays.
Not to interrupt you, but you can go back to them. Are these cross-cultural?
Yes. Anybody from any culture can be any of these types. Certain cultures have been typed by different Enneagram teachers.
Sure.
So certain values are more prominent in a given country or even a given city or a given family. So a person might be more encouraged to be a certain way. The United States culture is very 3. So people who aren't 3s try to be 3s, or people try to find the 3 in themselves.
Where would you put Canada?
Canada, probably 6. Okay. Canada, and 6, we can just get to that briefly, is the devil's advocate, the defender, the loyalist. You're fraught by insecurity, thinking of worst case scenarios. Usually I won't do it for me, but I'll do it for you. You know, I'll stand up for somebody else. But if I'm pushed, I'll come at you with full force, but then I'll totally second guess myself and think, did I do the right thing? Did I overstep my bounds?
Yeah.
So
I think maybe number 2 as well, a little bit.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
We'll take care of you. But
yeah.
I'm not really looking at, well, what is, because Canada has a very kind of, I don't know, like we think probably very highly of ourselves. We have a very, a huge chunk of the population, a very comfortable lifestyle. You know what I mean? And
we're very proud of our socialized medicine.
Exactly. All the other places in the world are, just, they struggle so much, and we got it pretty sweet. We got lots of land, lots of resources,
and we welcome immigrants from other countries, and we're very egalitarian as a society.
What are the problems of Canada? Where are our problems? Do we look at ourselves enough? That's why I was thinking that.
Right.
A little bit.
Well, also a big part of Canadian culture is comparing ourselves to American culture.
Right.
Which is a total 6th thing.
Oh,
we want to find out what America's doing so that we can do the opposite.
Yeah,
that's so true.
Yeah.
We're very proud of the ways that we're different than them.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, we consume far more American media than Canadian.
Sure.
Yeah.
We have to have regulations in place to consume Canadian content.
Yeah, to kind of force it on us. Yeah. Because left to our own devices, we'll watch nothing but American TV.
Yeah.
Or American. Has 1 in 100 Canadians ever seen a Canadian film? I mean, apart from Francophone Quebecers, right. Very few.
Sure.
Very few. Sure. And yet, if somebody makes fun of a Canadian,
they go into attack mode.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And some British friends of mine said they have never seen a more flag-waving nation than Canada, including the United States.
Wow.
Which surprised me, because
I blame most Canadian for that with your ads.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's indicative as well. That was a massively successful campaign.
Yeah.
And it was endlessly spoofed, and it was lovingly embraced.
Yeah.
So number 5.
Five is the investigator. The kind of removed expert who doesn't participate in life but observes and theorizes and becomes an expert on some obscure subject. And if they find out that somebody's interested in their obscure subject, you can't shut them up. And their ruling passion is avarice or greed. So that translates to parsimony, a sense of a stinginess with their personal resources. I don't want to tell you my feelings. I don't want to tell you my thoughts. I'm just going to keep that to myself because the world wants more from me than I'm willing to give it. So 6, as I mentioned, is the devil's advocate, the loyalist. The ruling passion is fear or anxiety.
Yeah.
It's a constant sense of what might go wrong, but the interesting thing about that is anything you can say about 6s, you can also say the opposite. So 6s are a bundle of contradictions. They're introverted and they're extroverted, and they're sweet and they're sour, and they're passive and they're aggressive. And if nothing is going wrong, they're worrying about all the things that might go wrong. But if something goes wrong, they go right into action and fix it and do exactly the right thing. 7 is the enthusiast, and they want to do every single thing in the world. They want to eat every item on the buffet, and they're full of plans of what they're going to do next. And their ruling passion is gluttony, not necessarily for food, but it might be, but it's for life, for experience, for anything. And 8 is the challenger, tough, independent, assertive, aggressive. And their ruling passion is lust, not necessarily for sex, but for intensity, which could be in terms of like really hot food. Or a really lively conversation, or
maybe intense exercise, intense sensation of any kind.
Loud music, firecracker sex, like anything like that, just because it makes you feel alive. And then 9,
that could be an 8.
And then 9 is the peacemaker, which I've known people to type Canada's 9 as well. So very calm and soothing, and not important. They believe that they're nobody special. And they tend to have this calming presence on others. You just kind of tend to relax when you're around them without them even doing anything. And they just agree with everybody, which can also be really frustrating because they never take a side. And they'll fight by not fighting with you. They'll agree with whatever you want them to do, which they don't agree with at all. And they'll smile and then they'll not do it. They can be very, very stubborn.
What would you put yourself at? Based on this brief explanation, obviously. But.
Yeah, it's tough because, like we said before, you can see little bits of yourself in all of them.
Each of us is ultimately all 9 types.
Right.
It's just we specialize in one of them. Also, we borrow from one or both neighboring types. So as a 3, you might have what's called a 2 or a 4 wing. Mm-hmm. Because imagine it like a color spectrum.
Yeah.
So you're one pinpoint on that spectrum, which probably isn't, say, a perfect red. It might be partway into orange.
Yeah.
And some people are so close in the dividing line between 2 types, it's really hard to figure out which one.
Yeah.
So you borrow neighboring characteristics. Also, each of the types has lines. The Enneagram's a diagram. So there's direct connections to other types. So under stress, you might exhibit some of the characteristics of another type. But under security, the characteristics of yet another type. So none of us is so one-dimensional that we're one set of characteristics all the time. But that's kind of our home base. It's where we come back to a lot of the
Default
time. Or you
almost.
might just be in a situation where you must be aggressive and assertive. So you'll look like an 8.
Yeah.
Right.
Or you might be under the influence of your culture, which wants you to be a certain way, or your family, or you might have residue of a strong parental figure who is a given type, so you absorb some of their values.
Yeah. Omen, what would you say you are?
Yeah, I can't find a specific one. I got that. So there is an online test, right?
Yeah, I just Googled online.
Yeah, that's
I want to do it,
Yeah,
but
that's
I
what I want
couldn't
to do
find.
before I kind of even say, I think I'm this or that. I'd rather just do the test.
Yeah.
And just really
It's going to help.
I don't want to even skew it anyway.
Yeah.
And also I feel like just personally, I'm in a very kind of a shifting stage almost of my life in terms of just, I don't know, there's feels like a lot of change is happening. I'm consciously trying to encourage it and grow and develop and learn about myself. So, I could say definitely from the past, I see 2 in me for sure. And, a little bit of 3 even, but.
That's what I wanted to say. It seems like there are people who go through personal changes, especially the people who go on a path of just thinking that a lot of people stay the same for most of their lives, but there are people who get into personal evolution, if you want to call it, and psychedelics play a big role in it too.
They can.
Ayahuasca,
they can be very valuable for that.
If you use them or work with them, or
and meditation and therapy and creative practice,
even
and
floating,
and
floating,
reading, even
right. So it seems like these things are like patterns of behavior that you kind of get addicted to, and then you stop seeing the negative aspects of them, and you kind of need something to make you aware of them, whether it's by somebody talking to you or a teacher, or in my case, like psychedelic did it for me, and kind of showed me whatever I was doing wrong. And I could see when you were talking about the all 9 different kinds, I could hear some negative things that I used to do that belong to often, but I changed them. I've already changed them. That's why I'm kind of confused, like which one I belong to now, because I'm in that phase, like the past 2-3 years, been in a phase of trying to working on myself, and then I'm seeing, okay, so that I had that before, but I don't have it anymore because
my favorite book on the subject is called The Wisdom of the Enneagram, and one of the things it has for each of the 9 types is a chart of levels of health from 1 to 9. So 1 being saintly and 9 being murderous or suicidal. Because a healthy 3, for instance, looks so different from an unhealthy 3. They'd be unrecognizable as being the same type.
What would be the differences?
At an unhealthy level, you're compulsive. At a healthy level, you're manifesting the gifts of that type. But
I feel like I bounce back and forth.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is we'll have kind of an average, but in a moment of stress, you sink right down the levels. Like that's just inevitable.
Yeah.
or if you're going through a bad week or a bad year or anything like that. Yeah. And similarly, if you have a really, everybody's had the experience of like just falling in love with someone and everyone is wonderful.
That's true.
And everything is wonderful.
Yeah. Everything feels
nothing
great.
pisses you off.
Yeah.
And then conversely, on some days, everything goes wrong and everything is irritating. Everything makes you react to it in your own characteristic way.
Yeah.
But again, it's not impossible to again, try to control or be in peace, even in those situations. And
totally. And the higher you raise your center of gravity, your average, the more likely you are to be able to respond rather than react and to take stress. So like I'm saying, so when you're in love, you can get in a car accident and forgive the person.
Yeah. It's
just like, oh, well, accidents happen. Right. Because it's the same event as something that might be devastating otherwise.
Right.
So if you're in a state of like really high emotional health, then you can roll with whatever comes. But there's still going to be some stress in life and you can navigate it better and it doesn't stay as long. And you don't believe the compulsions that then come up.
Right.
So my compulsions, one of them is alienation. So when I'm doing the dishes, which is an interesting experience because, my mind's not occupied, it's just my hands. If I'm in a bad way, I start grousing about all these people that don't get me. All these superficial people that want me to do this or expect me to be into that or that don't appreciate that.
Same with me.
Fuck them, they suck and blah, 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 blah. In a compulsive place, I believe those thoughts. I believe that that's legitimate. I believe that that's what's bothering me right now. If I can step outside of that, I can think, okay, are the people that I'm thinking, who specifically am I thinking about? And when was the last time they gave me shit about those exact things? Did they ever? Am I just imagining that? Is that what's bothering me or is it something else? Because stress just looks for an outlet.
Yeah.
And if we're compulsive, we believe whatever it is that we're being compulsive about right now, we believe that's where my stress is coming from. But if you can step outside of that for a second, and if you're more aware of what your patterns and habits are, the more likely you are to say, okay, what's really going on?
Yeah.
Is it that? It might be. But what if it isn't?
That's why it's really important to have, really strong outlets of stress management that work well for you, Not to put Floathouse into there, but that's one thing that sensory deprivation does really well is, and it works on pretty much all people because we all have a nervous system. We all have a reaction to this environment, which allows us, it naturally uses our biochemistry to induce a very strong relaxation response. So even when you spend 90 minutes in the tank after the craziest week of your life, and it will, maybe you're not going to be the chillest person ever, but you will be a drastically different person when you come out. And then you can kind of okay, let's just breathe. And
if you can survive your 90 minutes, that is without getting out. Sometimes it's just hard. If you're really in your own shit and your mind is racing, going over. Some people just can't take it and they literally just get out.
Yeah. And for a lot of us, our compulsion is distraction.
Sure.
Yes.
So the float tank is completely counter to that.
Yeah.
Is to put yourself in an environment where there's no possibility of distraction and just to be there with your feelings and your thoughts. And like we were saying before, for men, this is particularly a challenge, is to say, okay, what's really going on with my feelings? Yeah. And can I just sit with that or float with that for 90 minutes?
Yeah.
That's a challenge.
And the cool thing about it too is it lets, since you're in a sensory deprived environment, it actually makes your body hypersensitive because nothing's coming in. So you want to sense something, but nothing's coming in. So all you really start doing is greater sensing your body and whatever that is, the energy, the feelings, the thoughts, anything that's left is the internal things, thoughts,
tension.
Emotions, tensions, just the sensation of your body. So that stuff just gets amplified. So it's a great tool to help you become, I feel the tension in my chest or in my back or in my neck. Or you really become your thoughts are right in your face. They just blah, because they're so noticeable. It's an amplifier. It's like someone's on a megaphone shouting your thoughts right into your ears. That's what it feels like.
Definitely.
And so it's
a
great way to teach you if you're having that thing. But
I think a lot of people come in with the expectation that it's going to do something for them right away, and they're going to just have this amazing introspective or relaxing experience.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that when they come in here, a lot of times it's hard work. This actually staying in there and like confronting that stuff is actually hard work. And a lot of people will give up quite quickly on it just because it's just like they don't want to do it. Like I think that they could spend that $40 doing something that's more gratifying, more instantly gratifying,
pleasurable or whatever.
Well, it's really similar to meditation. When you mention meditation to a lot of people, they say it's just just nonsense, or it doesn't do anything, or you just want to sit. They never spend the time to work on it. It's like an art. So that's really anything. Like you can't just grab a guitar and play some good music, so you got to practice, and flotation is the same too, I think.
And I had one yoga teacher that said that meditation has actually a very high dropout rate for that exact reason. Yeah. People will try it for a little while and they're just like, I can't do it, and they stop.
It's harder than floating.
It's super hard. And I think a lot of people are aware, because you hear it a lot in mainstream media and different articles and publications about the benefits of meditation. They're showing all these amazing, really profound benefits on multiple levels of people's, illnesses potentially, but yet it is very challenging, and
it doesn't come easily.
It doesn't come easy.
Doesn't come quickly, and we in general live in a very type 3 society that is very achievement based, and we're raised on movies and novels that hinge on somebody changing in a relatively short time frame.
And
that change being permanent.
Yes.
So there's, of course, this romanticized idea that I will come into a float tank, or I'll go to a meditation class, or I'll pick up an instrument and just be the wizard at it. They'll be the best, and then I'll have some transformative experience that will change me for the better for the rest of my life. When in actual fact, it's a long, slow process that lasts the rest of your life. And that's actually a really good thing.
Do you have
the rest of your life
any
to do
formal meditation practice that you do?
No, but I did a 10-week meditation course based out of a book that Gabor Mate recommended to me. Cool. And that's an interesting thing too, because he fully admits that he has resisted meditation for a lot of his life, even though he recommends it to people as a practice. But he did this book. It was called The Presence Process by Michael Brown, who was a South African music journalist. And it involves not that much meditation. 15 minutes first thing in the morning, 15 minutes last thing before going to bed. With a very simple mantra, different one each week for 10 weeks. And then a chapter for each week where you read it. And there's a lot of personal exploration involved that fits right in with Gabor's ideas. So if anybody likes Gabor Mate's work, I fully recommend this book.
Cool.
So I did
What's it called again, sorry? The
Presence Process.
Okay.
And I did this past January, February, March. And it's really hard to quantify what something like that does for you.
Yes.
But I will say this, and this has been corroborated by my girlfriends, and this gets back to the Enneagram too, is if either of you do an Enneagram test, it is very valuable if you do one with somebody sitting next to you who knows you. Because our self-concept...
And actually doing it with you?
Well, no, if you can just check in with them and it says, in this situation, would you do this or this?
Yeah.
And you'd say, well, I'd probably do that. And they would
agree?
Yeah. Because we have our sense of ourselves,
right.
But what's the reality?
Yeah. The funny thing is too, I used to think that I would be lying to myself about my negative qualities, but I think that I was actually probably harder on myself than somebody else might be, and be like, well, actually, you're not really as bad as you think in that area. Maybe you're not like that.
Totally. It's hard to be accurate either way. We can go too far in one direction or the other. We think we're worse than we are.
Yes.
Or we think we're better than we are.
Exactly.
And then the other thing about an Enneagram, finding out your type, is the tests, by the admission of the people who create them, are accurate to a degree of about 60 to 70%.
Okay.
The best way to really get to know your type is in consultation or conversation with somebody who knows it. So with a therapist, with a coach, with a group.
Or with a teacher.
With a teacher of some kind who can give you direct interactive feedback.
Will your workshops have the, will everyone do an Enneagram during it or before it, or how will that work?
We're not going to deal with the 9 types in this particular workshop. Okay. We're going to deal with the 3 instincts. Right. And there will be interactivity about that. We will eventually come up with a workshop that deals with the 9 types as well. Cool. It's just there's more of them, so it just takes longer to do.
Is this something you're going to have like a whole website created? And
we already do, actually.
Oh, cool.
9riverswellness.com.
9riverswellness.com. Great.
Yeah, and I've got some articles on there where I type different famous people as different types. So I've got some singers, some comic book characters even.
Yeah.
Anyway, but to get back to what I was saying about the presence process. Oh yeah,
That makes sense though.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
great.
comic characters are.
They're probably classics.
They're the equivalent of mythological characters, really. You know, like one of my theater history profs in university told me that when he was a kid, everyone age of like 6 or 7 had read the Iliad and the Odyssey, and everybody knew the Bible. And the version of the Bible that I read was a comic book. It was called the Picture Bible, and I've still got it. And the Old Testament lends itself to comic book storytelling really well. There's all kinds of supernatural things happening. And Samson is basically the equivalent of Superman. Instead of kryptonite, it's if you cut his hair.
Yeah.
You know, but nowadays, very few people know the Bible.
Yes.
And very few people know the Greek and Roman gods and goddesses.
Yep.
But superheroes are all over the place, and they're very similar. And I think they embody different characteristics of the general population quite well. You know, and people feel drawn to certain characters. And
Who's your favorite superhero, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's got their favorite superhero.
Totally. And it might not be the most popular one there is.
Yeah.
So anyway, with the presence process, it's very hard to quantify what exactly I got out of that, because that was within a few months of me having done an iboga ceremony, which is the African kind
You
of...
did iboga?
Yeah, in October.
Oh.
It's the African
come back to
ayahuasca,
that, yes.
for anybody who doesn't know what it is.
We'll come back to that.
And I got, but it's also very hard to quantify, okay, what did I get out of that? But anyway, just to get to this point that I'm circling around for a very long time, I had one of the busiest 3 months of my adult life in that exact period. And among other things, the presence process also deprived me of a little bit of sleep each day, because I was going to bed 15 minutes later than I normally would. That's not a tremendous amount, but that's something.
Yeah.
And I was waking up 15 minutes earlier to do that part. In spite of how busy I was, stress did come, which is inevitable, and it rolled right off. And this is what I was getting back to. My girlfriend corroborates this. This is not just me with an inflated sense of my own
accomplishment.
It really seemed to happen. When stress came, I was able to deal with it, and then it would go away. And I was able to be present and to enjoy myself. And another thing, this presence process recommends not drinking alcohol and not smoking marijuana for the entire 10 weeks. And I hardly drink anyway. And I'd kind of been off marijuana for a while anyway, so that wasn't hard to give up. But marijuana especially is my crutch when I'm stressed, especially when stress is acute. That's the way I've blown off steam. And I decided, okay, let's just see if I can do without it. If an emergency happens, then I won't stop myself. You know, I have my pot cookies in the freezer if I need them. Never even felt tempted.
Wow.
So even with all the benefits that came from, I've yet to continue it and make it a regular thing in my life, which is the ego is a clever bastard, you know, wants to stop you from doing these things that are actually very good for you.
Yeah.
But I will return to it. And it's also recommended that a person does the presence process multiple times.
Sure.
I'm gonna put you guys on that camera for a moment.
Go ahead.
Sure.
All right. Thanks, Director Omed. So what were you going to say?
I was going to say, how would you describe presence to somebody who has no idea and is totally wrapped up in their own head and has no real idea of that kind of concept? How would you describe that state to somebody?
Well, I would never claim to be an expert. But in the very simple term, I would say it's responding rather than reacting to the world as it is.
And what's the big difference? How would you define the differences of responding as opposed to reacting?
Yeah, a reaction is usually based not on what's really happening. It's based on a conditioned response, an expectation. So let's say somebody says something challenging to me. They might be getting in my face because they're an asshole.
Yeah.
They might be playing. It might be their way of actually showing affection.
Yeah.
There's actually a number of different possibilities. It might be completely misdirected. They might be angry from some other reason. They're taking that on me. If I'm present, I can look at all those possibilities. But if I'm reacting, I'm going to react in the habitual way that I've reacted since childhood anytime anybody's ever done that to me.
Right.
So that reaction might be to get right back in their face, or it might be to completely withdraw, or it might be to break down in tears.
So kind of like that knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Right.
And generally, we go through our lives reacting. We come into most situations and we relate to most people based on what we think they are like, what we think they think of us and are going to do to us, not the way they actually are.
Right.
Which prevents us from really knowing people, prevents us from really having an honest, meaningful exchange with even the closest people in our lives.
Yeah.
much less with random people that we encountered on the street.
I think, and also with yourself.
Yeah.
Really, having that relationship with yourself. And this is another cool aspect. We mentioned this briefly, I'm not sure when, a couple podcasts ago. We're getting so many now, I'm losing count. But
it's a feud between every podcast you've ever done. Things reappear, they disappear.
They do for sure.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Well, you get on the same kind of trails and conversations. And
there's running themes.
Yeah, sure. And it's kind of like, just curiosity, that's where we go down. But
totally.
How when I was in Peru with this group of strangers, but in a space where it was fostered that there was no judgment and no sense to hold anything back. Everyone was there to work on themselves and heal and reflect and to learn and reveal and stuff like that. And everyone was just very open, like I was so open with those, because you're trying to be as open as possible with yourself. Like the whole point of doing that journey is to, dig up all this stuff that you're unconscious to and look at it and examine it and feel it and experience it and get a resolution if you can, or whatever
or come into some kind of a relationship with it.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you're in this type of mode of your life, and you're super open and able to talk to complete strangers about the darkest depths of your soul, or your life. And you're right. I think it's just a giant red flag when you have troubles doing that with your parents or your siblings or your
coworkers
or your partner.
Yeah,
you know what
totally.
I mean? Like, it's
and
just
that can also really help you figure out your Enneagram type too. Is what triggers me?
Yeah.
And what are my habitual reactions?
Right.
Where do I go when stress hits? Because stress hits us all.
Yes.
And that's an indication.
Yeah.
And totally. And if you can bring presence to it, you can actually look at it instead of believing it. Mm-hmm. Just like the doing the dishes example that I was giving. If I can become present in that moment and say, I'm doing it. I'm doing my habitual thing right now. Okay, let's look at that.
Yeah, you can catch it. You can bring that awareness to it. And
you catch yourself in the act.
Have you ever
what's
done a
really going on?
Meditation before?
No, but I've wanted to. And I actually worked with a guy on his one-man show about doing a 10-day retreat.
Great, yeah.
And so I got his very vivid account of
and that's what
how much comes up.
It really helps you to start to get better at recognizing those moments when you're caught up in your thinking, when you're caught up in that habitual reaction. And even though like maybe you caught it after it's already started, but at least you caught it. Yeah. And then the next time you do it, you maybe catch it just a little bit quicker, and then a little bit quicker, and soon enough you're going to catch it before that reaction has left you.
Right.
Because the reaction comes out like it happens within an instant, but it happens inside first.
And then you recognize what makes me react.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, but you're able to recognize the reaction before it comes out.
Yeah.
And then just sit with it, and then respond versus react.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I did one several years ago now, about 7 years ago, and it's profound.
Iboga?
Sure. No, this was Vipassana.
Oh.
Vipassana, yeah.
It does seem like all these different kind of things we're talking about are all related in some way, and it all is kind of a form of self-observation.
Yeah.
And I think that in this day and age, I don't know if you would agree, that is such an important thing for people to be doing now. I
totally.
think, just
anybody.
Anybody,
and it's so simple. What am I really feeling?
Yeah.
Yes.
What do I really believe?
Yeah.
The concept is not complicated at all, but yet it's the most difficult thing to do. And we're on this giant human societal path of just reactive behaviors.
Yeah.
And we're trying on an individual level to realize that and become more aware. And it's going to take, who knows? I don't know where it's going to lead or what's going to happen or whatever, but
I do feel like there's a lot more of this kind of stuff going around now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you. I think with like yoga, meditation, psychedelics, Enneagrams, all the just personal development courses, whatever it is. I feel like so many more people are interested in that kind of thing than ever before. Where before it was always just like a pretty kind of traditional nuclear family kind of life where you kind of you go to university, you get a job, you work, you get a mortgage, you have a family, and that's your life.
And again, it depends where you are. Like probably
I would
not too
say
many
North
people
America.
but yeah, not too many people in Fort McMurray are into the Enneagram. I'm just imagining.
Oh, yeah, I
or
think,
Vipassana meditation.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Vancouver is a little hub for that, for sure.
Which it didn't used to be as well. You know, like a friend of mine's dad once described Vancouver as having been pretty much a glorified logging town up until the 70s.
Yeah,
Like a mill town.
That
Yeah.
long? Wow.
up until the 70s. Yeah.
Roughly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well,
And
it was
then
a pretty
now
rough city overall too. I think.
Yeah.
Like,
a lot of people worked in mills.
yeah.
Blue collar.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually what led to the downtown east side. It was just like all these affordable apartment units, basically, and they were all workers that would come in for seasonal work and things like that. And of course, with that, you'd have like male workers, so they'd have like bars and saloons pop up, and then with everything that goes on with that, like prostitution, and then the downtown east side is born, basically.
There's a poet by the name of Peter Trower who wrote a trilogy of autobiographical novels, the first of which takes place in like the coast of BC in 1951. So he grew up in Vancouver. At the age of 51, he was 19, and he started working as a logger. And the way it happened was you came down to the downtown east side, and there were hiring offices with chalkboards that told you who was hiring for what.
Yeah. Wow.
Then you'd sign on for a job, and then the seaplanes, the float planes were just right there.
Wow.
And then you'd go on one, and you'd fly out to some inlet that there was no other way to get to.
Amazing.
Except by sailing, I guess.
So neat.
And then you'd work there, and then you'd build up money because there was nowhere to spend it. And then you'd come back into town, and you'd blow it all on booze and hookers and heroin.
Yep.
And then you'd hire out again, and you'd be staying at some cheap hotel.
And even to this day, Vancouver is quite a transient city. People come and go, and everyone seems to be a transplant of some kind.
Yeah,
A
totally.
lot of people are, anyways. Are you born and raised here?
I actually was.
You are? You're a native? Yeah.
But that's unusual.
Yeah.
And I meet very few people, and I meet a lot more people whose eyes just really widen when they
you're
find out
born
you're
in
actually
Vancouver?
from here.
Yeah.
You
He
actually went to
taught us
school
the
here.
trade secret of the salmon berries.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's
I forgot. What about the Sandberries?
salmon berries are like a raspberry but pink in color, like a salmon.
Oh, yeah.
That are really.
We gotta go
delicious.
hunting for those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gathering, I should say.
There's none left right now. But
There are loads of them. I mean, like 2 months ago, right?
Yeah,
3 months
exactly.
ago. There are loads of them in a
May,
trail very
June.
close. Yeah, very close to our place. So
Okay.
I actually, Erica and I go there for running or just walking. There's a river, and I used to pick and eat. I never knew the proper name for it.
There you
So,
go.
Yeah.
My girlfriend makes crumbles out of them.
Yeah, and apparently, so is it the same from the same plant, blackberries, or
No,
they're just very close.
They're related,
usually.
but
Yeah.
they're not the same. Yeah.
Okay.
And they grow in the same environment.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, you want to wrap it up? Do you have anything else you want to talk about? Anything that's burning inside you want to get out?
So since our last podcast with you, what have you been? Let's just kind of recap. Like, what have you been up to, and what's coming up for you in the next little while?
Yeah, just to touch on those. So just to give you the hard details of the workshop.
Yes.
The date is Saturday, September 20th.
Okay.
From 12:30 to 4:30 at the Roundhouse Community Center downtown here. It's paid by donation.
Cool.
And if you want more info, go to 9riverswellness.com and send us an email. We'll have more details up there very soon. I've also recently seen a screening of a feature film based on one of my old plays.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that actually.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Like, how are you? You must be excited.
Yeah.
This is really cool. So this is like
great.
is this your first like cinematographic kind of debut, if you will? Or
Well,
this is the biggest film you've ever written.
it's grandiose to say that I've written it. I co-wrote the source material. So
What does that mean?
So it's the movie is adapted from a play that I co-wrote that toured in 2003.
Okay.
Somebody else wrote the screenplay. Somebody else directed it.
I see. Interesting.
But it's very faithful to the play in terms of like it fleshed it out because the play only had 2 characters.
Okay.
And we never find out where they live. We never find out what their jobs are. We never find out like
So they had to.
who their
extrapolate.
siblings are or what community they live in, who their friends are. So the movie fleshed all of that out. And the title of it is The F Word. In the United States, it's called What If, because
Right.
American advertisers are uncomfortable with a movie called The F Word, apparently. And it's directed by Mike Dowse, who did Fubar and Goon.
Nice.
And it stars Daniel Radcliffe, Harry Potter,
Yeah.
and Zoe Kazan, who wrote and starred in an excellent indie movie called Ruby Sparks. She's also the granddaughter of Elia Kazan, who's a legendary American movie and stage director. He directed Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront.
Wow.
And it comes out August 22nd. It's a wide theatrical release, and it's really good, which I'm thrilled about. I've seen it 5 times.
Yes. Cool. And it will be in theaters.
It'll be in theaters everywhere.
That's amazing.
August 22nd. In Canada, in the US, in Britain. Yeah, it's a Canadian-UK co-production.
Great.
And like I was saying earlier, has 1 in 100 Canadians ever seen a Canadian film? Like, even that's probably like
There's gotta be one
hopeful.
out there that was pretty. Oh, what was that one?
Strange Brew, maybe?
Strange Brew. That was
Porky's back in the day.
Porky's too. That was
What's Strange Brew? I never heard of it.
That's the McKenzie brothers.
Okay.
Rick
Bob
Moranis,
McKenzie,
right? Was
Dave
that it?
Thomas, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Cool.
yeah, it's funny.
Well, that's
So,
great.
like,
So yeah, it's going to be called, in Canada, it's going to be called The F Word?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and F in
least
this
that's true.
case stands for friend. So the premise of it is a guy and a girl meet at a party. They really get along. They just have the best rapport. It turns out they live close to each other. So when they leave the party, they walk home, they exchange phone numbers, and then it comes out she's got a boyfriend. And then the guy kind of has to reevaluate, like, so were we in fact flirting? Did she think of me that way? Does she think? But they decide to stay friends anyway. And the more he hangs out with her, the more he falls in love with her. But can't do anything about it because not only does she have a boyfriend, she has a good boyfriend. He's a good guy, and they've been together for 5 years.
and we've all been there at some point, haven't
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a very relatable dilemma.
we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So F stands for friend in the F word.
Okay.
That's smart.
So I'm very excited about that.
Well,
and
I'm
then
going to have to go see that. I'm excited.
apart from
We should all
that,
go see it together.
yeah,
We'll go.
totally.
We should
I'm
go.
going to be in Edmonton. I'm going to be at the Edmonton Fringe doing my one-man show marathon, which is about the Enneagram and about having been a really bad track and field runner in high school. And I'm going to be doing a one-off of that as a benefit for the Vancouver Fringe on September 2nd,
Right.
which is an expensive show because it's a fundraiser.
Yes.
And there's also going to be a bluegrass band and a reception. And I'm remounting medicine for the Victoria Fringe. And in the meantime, my girlfriend and I have been working up our workshop, preparing for that and booking it elsewhere as well. And I've been working on a variety of other writing and directing and editing projects.
Are you going to do the workshop more than just the one time?
Yes,
Okay,
we're going to do it many times.
Good.
That's our hope anyway. I hope that there's demand for it. I hope
Right.
that there's demand to do it locally more than once. And we're going to shop it around to communities near and far.
Great.
Well, I think we should definitely promote that for sure.
Absolutely,
In fact,
yeah.
I want to go to it. What
Okay,
was
I do-
the
I do as
date
well.
again?
September 20th. It's a Saturday.
20th. Yeah, I definitely
12:30
want
to
to go.
4:30.
Yeah. I'm gonna. Do I can't book it online? Do I just?
Not yet, but if
But I
you, but now that I know, I can put your name down.
Yeah. No, I'd love to go. Seriously, I'm
you
gonna
bet.
bring Lisa. That's my girlfriend as well. So
Okay,
I'm sure
great.
she'd be into that
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people I meet and tell this workshop about are interested, and I think it's because so many of us have some creative thing we would like to do,
Yeah.
and we know all too well that we tend not to do it.
What
Yeah.
day is September 20th?
Saturday.
Saturday. Perfect. Cool. I usually have Saturdays off.
Great. Well, I mean, we'd love to keep you going, keep you coming back. I mean, and be the first three-peat as well whenever that happens.
Because we haven't even touched on Iboga yet.
I know, and
Oh,
Boga. And I want
gosh.
to get more into psychedelics with you, just a little
Yeah.
bit. There's lots. So come back again.
Okay.
It has to happen. And thank you so much for coming on. Congratulations with the big film. I think I'm super excited for you. So I can only imagine how fun that's going to be for you. And just
I'm
soak
thrilled.
it in, enjoy it. you know?
Totally.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Awesome job.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so
All right.
much.
Yeah.
Whatever
All
is.
right.